Hi, thank you for joining. Today I want to cover the asset repository of Ivanti Asset Manager. So in the previous video, I showed that you can get to assets by drilling into the dashboard, and that's one way to get to assets. I didn't mention these top level tabs up here, and these are uh, ways to get into various parts of the system. And so there's also a way to get into and see assets through this top level tab. And this is going to give me the managed devices. So managed devices is one of many searches that are available, pre-configured searches that are available in the system. And just as with dashboards, you can add your own searches as well. So this search gets you into a workspace, and the workspace is showing all the assets based on this search. So there's a couple of things that you can do. There's a lot of things that you can do in the workspace itself. So you can do things like filter on various values. So you might want to say, just let me see the items that are built and maybe deployment in progress. So maybe there's a reason I want to see just those particular assets. So there's a filter capability. There's also the ability to obviously you can sort on fields. You can also do a multi-sort. So you could sort on multiple fields. So let's say maybe location and um, the asset type. So maybe I want to look at the assets in that way. And when I do, it's going to show me in the header field. It's showing me which fields are involved in the sort. So I can do that. I can sort by just a single field, just by clicking on the header. I can also group by uh, field. So I could do a group by asset type. And in fact, a lot of times you'll see the default presentation in a workspace or even in a dashboard is grouped by some field. In this case, it's grouped by asset type. So I can expand these groups or just just receive a summary of how many things are in there. But what I want to do today is go a step deeper and take a look at the fields that are tracked, the kind of information that can be stored and tracked in Ivanti Asset Manager. So here we have a particular asset, and it's opened up to the Details tab. Each one of these tabs across here has additional information, specific information about the asset, and we'll take a look at most of those today. So on the Details tab is details, including kind of descriptive information about it. There's also assignment information, so it's who it's assigned to and where it's assigned, its status, and the kind of environment. Whether it's test or development or production kind of information can be tracked, as well as purchase information. So we know when it was purchased, we know what its useful life is, remaining useful life in months based on its age. And we also have some warranty information as well as some additional tracking information. So that's all available in the in the Details tab. Let's take a look at the Discovery tab. Here we find information that is provided by the Discovery tool. So Ivanti Asset Manager is discovery agnostic, so you can have your own discovery tool, or you can use the discovery tool from Ivanti. And I would just say, the more information you can collect, the better. So there's a lot of fields available in this discovery area. So the more detailed information that you can get from your discovery tool, the better. There's also the ability to see the discovered values for an asset in comparison to the assigned values, or I'll say the should be values. So in this case, we can see that this device has been assigned to Andrew Smythe, but the last person to log into it was Bill Barker. So maybe that's fine. Maybe multiple people log into this device, or maybe it's not. And so that's something that can trigger that can trigger a notification or even an action. And in fact, there is a dashboard focused specifically on assets that have an assigned user that's different from the login user, or where the location. In this case, we see the location for this device. This was purchased for the London office, but it's sitting in the Salt Lake City headquarters office. So something happened there, and by having both the discovered values as well as the assigned values, we can surface areas where those don't agree. All right, so there's also an area for software. So here we see a list of all of the software that was discovered on the system. There's information about networking information. There's also an area for user assets. So we said before that this was assigned to Andrew Smythe. So all of the assets assigned to Andrew would be listed here. So in this case, there's only this one, but you can imagine he might have a laptop, he might have a docking station, he might have a phone assigned to him, and they would all be listed here. There's also the ability to do relationships. Now, the best way to look at that is you can build out here showing how things are dependent on each other. And the best way to look at that is in a graphical format. So we can see that this Exchange server that we're looking at, the email service depends on it, but this server itself depends on some other things. It depends on a SQL server, depends on a SAN, and the SQL server itself depends on some other server. And so this can give you a insight into what might happen if we were to take down this server, or if we have to implement a change on one of these things. This is going to tell you the downstream areas that could be affected. So there's also an area for contracts. So the system supports contract management, and in this case we've got a couple of contract line items that are associated with this asset. So there's an entitlement for SQL Server. There's also a purchase agreement and a maintenance agreement that are related to this particular asset. There's an area for vendor information. So in this case, we've got Dell as the vendor. And in terms of vendors, there's also the ability to record scorecards for a vendor. So anytime that there's an interaction with that vendor, whether it's for support or during a purchase transaction or anything else, you can record a scorecard, and then inside the vendor management portion of the system, those scorecards are summarized, and you can use that information when you're talking to vendors, when you're comparing to vendors, or when you're negotiating with vendors. You have information then that you can share with them. There's also finance information, so this is kept a little bit separate from some of the other details. And based on your role, you can either expose or hide this financial information. In fact, that's true with any of the information that you see in the system. Based on your role, that's going to determine what you see and what you can do in the system. So this is kind of financial information. We can see like what organization it's assigned to, We can see the purchase information. So here's the purchase order. We can drill back to that purchase order if we wanted to and look at all of the other equipment that was purchased on that same purchase order. We can also see financial transactions related to this asset. So in this case, we see a purchase information and then also various maintenance payments that were made relative to this asset, and so we can see our our total cost over time. There's also an area to keep notes. So you might have you might need to record notes about a system over its life, and there's a way to do that. There's also an area for attachments. So in this case, we've got the owner's manual attached here, as well as something else from Dell. So there's no limit to that. You can add multiple things, or just add a link to something. Maybe you've got documentation or some other thing online. You can just add a link to that. There's also an area for inventory transactions. So this is a way of tracking over time the assignment of an asset. So you can imagine maybe for a desktop, or especially like for a laptop, that might get assigned over its lifetime to more than one person, or even it could be moved from one location to another, and all of that kind of information is tracked as an inventory transaction. Okay, and then there's also a scan log. So if you have a scanner, a barcode scanner, or an RFID scanner, every time it gets scanned, then it's going to record a record in here, so that you can track how it's been moved or scanned through the organization. And then there's an audit history. So the audit history shows anytime the values related to the asset are changed. There's a date time, and then there's also a type of transaction, and then a record of who did that transaction. So here's a couple that I did, and so that's recorded in terms of, here's an area where I changed the asset subtype from server to virtual server. All right, and so that's the kind of information that's tracked in the asset repository. Thank you for joining.